Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Maddie Martin. I am the head of growth and education for Smith AI. We're a virtual receptionist and web chat company for live phone calls, inbound and outbound, and live and self-serve web chat, serving small businesses across the country. So I would like to introduce you today to Katy, and we are going to be discussing through a live Q&A for you, doing less and harnessing change well in 2019, tips for effectively developing and marketing your brand as a lawyer to grow your practice, attract clients with ease, and create a more fulfilling, balanced life. Now, Katy is a change and branding expert and founder of Purist Consulting. She works with law firms, lawyers, and organizations on growing in size and profits by mastering change and developing brands that get their message out effectively. The results include happier, more productive lawyers, reduced stress, attracting better clients, and more revenue. Katy practiced securities law for over 14 years, and she chairs the ABA Law Practice Division 2018-2019. Katy, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Tracy. Thanks for having me. And Maddie, of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what makes you qualified to advise us on harnessing change?
Sure, absolutely. So my background is, and everyone should know their story. So my real story is, I'm an immigrant. We immigrated to the U.S. in 1979 during the revolution in Iran, and we really couldn't stay there anymore because we weren't of the religious majority that had taken over the country. And so we thought we were going to leave for 2 weeks. So we packed 2 suitcases and we went to Indiana where my extended family lived. And it turned out we never went back, right? Because of the religious and the cultural issues and the political issues going on in that part of the world still today. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I got to grow up in the Midwest, and I'm blessed and grateful for all the opportunities I got. And so I always wanted to be a lawyer, Maddie. I wanted to save the world. And that's the main reason. But the second wrong reason, I thought, well, maybe as an immigrant, they will love me more if I'm a lawyer. And what I found through 10 years worth of research and work with clients is the underlying theme to everyone's story is that we don't feel like we fit in and we don't feel like we're good enough for the practice of law, for being who we are. So that was my theme and my story. And so I did go to law school. But right about that time, my family moved to Southern California, but I stayed because it was top 25 in the country. And I always wanted to be a securities lawyer, and I knew there was no market for me on the West Coast. So I became a securities lawyer, and I moved straight to D.C., and I had a wonderful career that I'm grateful for. I was at the SEC, but before that, I was a federal lobbyist on the Hill, so I know how that ugly sausage is made. And then from there, I went to the Securities and Exchange Commission, where I was there when Enron blew up. And I did a lot of the post-Enron rulemaking and a lot of the cleanup post-Bernie Madoff. And I was slowly becoming disenchanted, Maddie, because that's not what I had signed up for, and financial services wasn't supposed to have those issues. I mean, I actually knew Bernie Madoff, and my husband says, don't tell people that. But we all knew him, right? Because we were a very small group of regulators and regulated. And it was painful. So after that, I went to a major law firm in their DC office, and I switched hats, right? And I implemented a lot of the rules that I had written at the Securities and Exchange Commission. And my clientele were always the big boys, Franklin Templeton, Fidelity, the wirehouses. It was always me and men twice my age, and I was whining and dining them. And it was then that I started to give a lot of advice. I didn't know it, but it was branding advice to my fellow lawyers in DC. People would say to me, how'd you get ahead? How'd you get that great job? Because every job I had, people would come and ask me to come and work for them. I wasn't seeking out new opportunities. So I would take people to lunch, fellow lawyers, and I would say, hey, I got an hour. I'll take you to lunch. Here's what I did. You try it. See if it works. If not, I'll take you to lunch again and we'll work on it. So that's how my second career started. And for the last part of my legal career, I went in-house. My father was getting ill out here in Southern California, so I decided to move back home instead of staying in law firm life in D.C. And I was in-house counsel to very large mutual funds. And it was at that point that I burnt out. My husband at the point was my boyfriend, and we only saw each other on the weekends. And he said to me one weekend, "You don't look happy. Make sure you don't burn out and blow up." And I was sort of curious, but I was sort of offended too. I'm like, who blows up? Like, what kind of thing is that to say to somebody? But I went to work with that thought in mind, and it was a Wednesday, and I had spent 15 hours drafting just a small part of a mutual fund prospectus, and that's all you really need to know about that. And so I went home at 9 o'clock at night and I opened my own mailbox, and there just so happened to be one of my own prospectuses. And what do you think I did with it, Maddie? I reflexively threw it away because no one reads that stuff. And that was my big aha moment that, oh my goodness, this is not why I became a lawyer. I am no longer saving the world. I'm no longer happy. It was a very personal decision. I don't tell this story because I want every lawyer to stop practicing. In fact, that's the opposite. I want every lawyer to consciously choose to practice and thrive in their practice and make it easy on themselves and generate a lot of money doing it too and be of service. So back to my story, I quit cold turkey. This was 2 years before the recession, and no one needed to reinvent themselves. No one was. So as a result, everyone thought I was crazy. I thought I was crazy, but I couldn't go back. I just knew it was going to kill me if I kept on practicing. So I took a random community college course. I had never even discovered community college until then, but the ad said, "What do Oprah, Bill Gates, and Warren Buffett have in common?" And I was mesmerized and fascinated. And the answer said that they're all practicing their natural talent. No, it didn't say that they're all wealthy, but you can tie that in, right? Mm-hmm. So I was like, fine, sign me up, $50, 3 hours of my life. What have I got to lose? But it was taught by an ex-Harvard litigator. And I remember rolling my eyes and thinking, oh my gosh, I can't get away from these lawyers to save my life. But it was the best thing I ever did. And I thank that man every day, Maddie, because what he taught me in that class, there was 40 of us, but I think I was so pathetic. They spent 20 minutes just on me alone, because I couldn't understand that everyone has something they're naturally good at. And if we do it long enough, we're going to live longer and be happy. And for my purposes, he said, if I turn it into a career, it's a no fail because people can tell I'm naturally good at it and they'll gravitate towards that. So at the end of the class, he pulled me aside and he said, "You have to do this for your fellow lawyers." And I was so exasperated. I said, "Do what? I don't understand. I'm a lawyer." And he said, "You're not a lawyer. You're much more. You can be whatever you want to be." So here we are, 12 years later. And really the business has grown from just branding of the people to really the consulting element, which is everything that has to do with the successful practice of law. So I'm very left brain linear analytical, which makes me really good at understanding strategy and operations. I don't know how many org charts I look at every day, but that's apparently, and who knew until I took this course, that it's very well balanced against my right creative brain. No one had ever asked me to exercise my right creative brain as a lawyer, and that's why I do what I do, because I want lawyers to have that opportunity. So my right brain allows me to be a really good marketer and really good at understanding that we're people first as lawyers and then practitioners, and we bring ourselves to work every day. And what are the tools that we can have in our toolbox to creatively use who we are as people and own it and develop it into a practice that thrives organically. And it doesn't have to be so painful and so difficult. And we can actually love what we do. So that's the skinny on your question. I hope I answered it well.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great lead in to my next question, because you demonstrated, such an ability to emotionally resonate with the audience. I mean, personally, I just feel like I understand you so much better, and I would have deeper trust in tapping into your expertise to grow my business. How does that role of emotional resonance play into a law practice practice and in better mitigating stress and the stress of whether or not you're going to, capture and convert new clients, and then also in your brand and how you present your practice and yourself that's identified to your practice to the world?
Very good question. So, unfortunately, we all still talk in terms of soft skills, and we poo-poo CLEs that are about this topic because we think we have to be talking about our substantive material, and that's what people are paying to learn. It's actually the other way around, and maybe I'm biased, but I see it 365 days a year for over 10 years worth of data now with lawyers. Emotional resonance factor is a term that I have trademarked. It truly is about you, the person. So 78% of everything people buy is not based on the content. No one is buying your ability to be a good lawyer. And that may rub you the wrong way, and I apologize if it does, but I would be doing you no good if I told you otherwise. People are only moved to express and buy through their values. And the only reason we buy anything is through whether it emotionally sits well with our right creative brain. So the reason I buy anything is because it emotionally resonates only through one emotion, and that emotion is happiness. At some level, do you as a lawyer, with who you are, and then your legal practice, make me happier than I was before I walked into your office? So I'm not looking for a cheerleader, and I don't want pom-poms. And I've heard it all. I've heard it from divorce lawyers, litigators. I mean, I've been around lawyers all my life, and now doing so much work with the American Bar Association, I see it all the time. I am not looking for you to be crazy happy being a divorce lawyer. I'm saying incrementally at some level, do you make me feel happier than not? So if you want to call the F word, feel, soft and mushy, that's okay, but you're running away from the easiest way to promote your practice. You can listen to CLEs all day long on substance. They're not going to get you there because 50% is your substance, but 50% is your actual ability to bring in who you are and the emotional resonance you have and actually sell the substance. No one is going to buy your credibility and your influence as a lawyer with your content until they buy you first as a person and that you emotionally get them, which is why, thank you for the compliment, Maddie, that story is so important. You know, I know my story, Pat, but it's real. It's genuine. If I just told the story to you without the genuine emotional resonance of it, it would fall flat every time. So that's what you want for resonance.
So I guess that brings me to another question, which is for folks who do want to have potential clients associating potential happiness with the law firm that they are going to hire, and they want to instill those values in their brand. How do you define a brand? Let's say you're in a solo or let's say you're in a solo practice, and you're thinking about bringing on, I'm thinking about a particular client of ours who just told me she's bringing on a partner. How do you create and maintain that brand as you go from a solo where it's very personal and individual to a bit of a bigger practice where there's two or more partners as part of the firm?
So you have to remember that the brand follows the person. It's kind of like in insurance when they talk about this insurance caller, follow the car or the driver. Your brand follows you wherever you go. So it really is irrelevant whether there's one person who's a solo or 400 people, or in the huge law firms, thousands of people. It becomes more, it's not even more of an imperative that your brand shine when there's 4,000 of you, but there's different strategies for making sure your brand is resonating in those settings. And it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, which is why later on, towards the end, I will tell you about our virtual branding bootcamp, which is a 7-month program. And I'll give you a gift around that if you stay to listen to the rest of this. It's about the fact that it takes time and longevity to really figure out who you are and implement it. So the distinction is still all about who the person is and what their brand is. And the brand has a 3-part definition that I developed. And you can actually see all that information in the book I wrote for the American Bar Association. It's now been since 2013, Personal Branding in 1 Hour for Lawyers. And you can access that book on our website, and we'll tell you that information later. But the first part of the definition is really uncovering who you are, unearthing your unique qualities and traits. Who are you? And as you can imagine, I have deep respect for all of my clients because it takes some courage to go there, to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's why people avoid it. And that's why people say, I'm just going to focus on my substance and I'm just going to watch CLEs on my substance because it's easier that way, right? We can just avoid the reality of who we are, which gets us only halfway there. So who are you? And then the second part of the definition is how are you going to consistently then put out the message of who you are, your story, your talents, the visual brand, all of that, consistently convey it to your audience. Because consistency is very, very important. There are 2 C's in brand development. There's clarity, which is the first part of the definition. Who are you? And then there's consistency. If your audience does not get the same message about who you are, and then they can deduce what you do in your practice from there, whether you're a solo or whether there's multiple lawyers, then they're not going to feel safe and they're not going to be drawn to you emotionally. Okay. It's not a question of safety as in physical harm. It's a question of, I don't really trust that person because the message keeps changing. And in this day and age, we're over tweeted, over texted, and over caffeinated, as I say, thanks to Starbucks. So people's attention spans are non-existent anymore. I mean, I look around at the lawyers that I know and we have very low attention spans too, which we'll talk about the stress element later around that. But if I'm already stressed and I'm not paying attention, it used to take 3 touches, and by touches, it's outbound communication of marketing, whether that's an email, a call, physical networking. Now it takes something like 9 touches for people to actually look up and notice we're there. And so consistency is critically important, but it doesn't matter how many times I reach out to you if there's nothing authentic and genuine and clear about who I am. And I'm just shoving product and legal service down your throat. People can sense, that's the emotional resonance again, that someone is faking it and they're not authentic and they're not about me, that they're just trying to plow through their day and generate more leads. It doesn't work. It's inauthentic. So that brings us to the third part of the definition then. How does all of this land on your audience? What's perception? Perception is reality in my world. If I am the audience of 1 even and I perceive something, you cannot tell me I'm wrong because it's my reality and it's my right to think that way. What you're in control of as the lawyer developing the brand and developing your success around it is how do I want to be perceived? And oftentimes as lawyers and as humans really, we don't feel in control of the bus anymore, if we ever did. And so a lot of our work is around convincing lawyers that you can have control of your life back and your career back. This is all within your purview. And what other people think, you can dictate the terms. You can't ever say 100% that what they're going to think is going to be what you like, but you do have a huge stake in it and a huge hand in it as well. So that's the 3-part definition. Who are you? Let's unearth who you truly are, your unique traits and attributes. And then let's consistently communicate that to your audience, like hopefully I did with my story at the beginning here. And then how's that landing on the audience? What are they doing with that information? And what's the feedback loop looks like? So then that becomes a lot of organic and deliberate surveying and revisiting the brand, revising. This is nothing that is held firm in place. So I have clients that have been clients for years because everything changes and everything shifts and we grow and we have to change. And so the brand has to evolve with the person and the entire law practice.
Wonderful. Wow, that is just a lot to digest right there. And we've only been talking for 20 minutes. I think there's a lot of actionable items that people are probably having running through their minds. One thing that's running through my mind, and I was just speaking with someone about this recently who runs a legal tech startup, is that, many attorneys didn't go to business school for a reason. These are people who are maybe, and this is not, applying to everyone, but many people who go to law school instead of business school, for example, are there because it is a somewhat safe profession, they think, or at the time they thought so, or, maybe a parent instructed that or demonstrated that it was a safe profession. And if someone is an attorney and feeling risk averse and not business savvy, and the idea of, taking the reins on better marketing and growing and communicating their story and their firm is intimidating to them, what are some of the first steps that they can do to deal with this authenticity that you recommend when it feels very scary and outside of their comfort zone? How do you balance that that need for authenticity, which I completely agree with feeling so out of your element, possibly in creating a brand and promoting your firm as a business and being savvy with marketing and growth strategies?
So every person has a right to be who they are. And by that, I mean, I get a lot of introverts. About 90% of our client base is introverts because that's generally the kind of person that's drawn to the practice of law. I just tend to be a complete anomaly. I've always been a black sheep, but now they call me a pioneer, which is kind of funny. So every introvert has that issue. And I always tell people, I just need you to push up against your comfort zone. I don't need you to do anything that's going to make you uncomfortable, because that discomfort is important for growth and change, but extreme discomfort makes you very awkward and stressed and tense, and people can then feel that, right? And they're like, you must not know what you're talking about because you're stressed. So my entire goal is to make people more at ease and owning who they are. And so this is true not just for lawyers. My husband's a dentist, and I remember 12 years ago, which was part of the reason why I started this business, he had opened up a new dental office. He'd been in practice for a while, but I remember standing next to him in that dental office, and I looked at him and I said, you have no idea how to get people in the seats to save their lives through taking care of their oral health. And he said, no, we were never taught that in dental school. And then I stopped and looked around, and we weren't taught that in law school, like you said. We weren't taught that. We did not get a business education. They're slowly starting to bring that around, but what a tragedy to take people's money and give them substantive knowledge, but no way to actually then implement that knowledge to help people, because we don't know how to get clients. We're not business savvy. Here's the good news. You can do it in your own way. It doesn't have to be one way. Don't look to other people. I must have had this conversation 8 times yesterday offsite at a client about being an introvert versus an extrovert. Just because extroverts do it a certain way does not mean it's the only way, and it doesn't even mean it's the right way. What works for you, which is where the intersection of all this lies. Don't look at anyone else. Don't listen to anyone else unless you're going to hire an expert like me, frankly, or somebody that has expertise in it, because then we think we have to adapt to other people's perceptions of us, other people's demands of us, and then we feel like a fraud, and it feels very fake and artificial, and we can never succeed with that because we're feeling uncomfortable in our own skin. So I never ask my clients who are not comfortable to do things they're outside of their comfort zone in terms of marketing themselves, because it's always going to fail. We bump up against it, but you have to know who you are, and you have to get educated and then adapt it to who you are, which is why brand development and the work we do with our clients is very individualized. It has to be, right? There is no one type of model that fits everyone. I don't even know any other consultant that does what I do, which is sit down individually and work with clients. Talk about about non-scalability, right? But I think it's tremendously important that everyone's voice be heard, and we take all the material around business and adapt it to how people sell well. So, for instance, I work with a lot of sales organizations and leadership organizations because they teach the content, good content in bulk volume, and business organizations. But then people always come to me and go, well, I was all hyped up and excited about this leadership course or this sales course, but a week later, I don't know how to use it because I'm not comfortable using it. Exactly. So then we take this fantastic body of work and we say, okay, we're going to park it over here, and then we're going to figure out what your natural traits are, what your strengths are, what your attributes are, what your story is, what those obstacles to you being able to use your story authentically in order to practice marketing in your own way, what those are. And then you can take the substantive sales or leadership content or business training and then apply it in a way that you allow yourself to shine.
Great. Well, I think you bring up a really good point, and I've heard it kind of summarized as don't compare your insides to others' outsides as well. And when we have the so-called Facebookization of the world where we are seeing what people want us to see, I think it's very easy to slide on that slippery slope of comparing yourself to others, and to even think that what they display as success is truly success, because sometimes people want you to see what they want you to see and not the truth. So being your authentic self and seeing the proof for yourself in that is powerful.
Yes,
and
it is.
It's consistent as well. It's something that is sustainable for you in the long term, because anything other than authenticity is going to feel exhausting.
Right? You're going to have to remember a whole lot of lies.
Right. Exactly.
It's tiresome, right? And my mother used to always say, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. So what you see externally is not always the case, because we always want to, like you say, put together the good Facebook face for others to see. And it's created a generation of adults, not just millennials, but adults who are living into some false reality, and it feels very uncomfortable. And that's why we have the high rates of suicide and the drug and alcohol problems we have in the legal industry and other industries, because people are so fraught with uncertainty around who they are. Now, how are you going to sell anything when you're not grounded in who you are? And I mean, I'm not sitting here saying I am totally grounded in who I am. I am far from it. I'm a work in progress. They say you teach what you're learning, and I'm certainly an example of that. However, every day I work on it, and it's all about self-awareness and how are you self-aware of how it's landing, because we don't want to recreate the wheel in legal services and being able to sell our services, but we got to know what's working and what's not.
Absolutely. And then for the things that we identify that are working, or the opportunities that we see, new channels we want to explore, I think it's so easy to get overwhelmed with the data and overwhelmed with opportunity. That data is not going to stop confronting us. There's always going to be a new marketing channel or new referral source or new networking group. How do we deal with the wealth of opportunities that are available, and how do we figure out, or how do attorneys figure out, running their own practice, what to tackle first?
So we just had ABA Tech Show, with which the ABA Law Practice Division that I chair owns and hosts. And Betsy Ziegler was our keynote speaker, and she talked about technology and change. And she said it really well. Change is happening so fast that right now, this second is the slowest you're going to see it. Tomorrow, it's just going to pick up and run right by you, as is technology. So trying to keep up with it is very painful, and you're never going to get it all done. I think of that all the time. I don't need to go through all my emails. I'm never going to get it all done. But to answer your correct question, then pick a couple of avenues that work for you. And so that's a loaded question, I feel like, because what works for me? It's going to be based on who you are and your brand. It has to be, because it's got to be authentic and genuine and feel good to you. If it feels good to you, you're going to show up and sell yourself well, and think outside of the traditional realm. As lawyers, we tend to put ourselves in our left linear analytical brain, which is what makes us great lawyers. It's A to B to C processing of data and information. However, you've got to jump into your right creative brain, which is what all our programs are designed for. In Virtual Bootcamp, you get 7 months, 2 hours a month of being in your right creative brain. And you get to play around with that and then figure out, where should I land? What should I do? Should it be at the ABA level? Should it be at the state bar level? Maybe I should join a meetup and actually then start networking through there. Maybe it's community service orientation. And then your world expands as you start looking at marketing opportunities and developing your legal career through your right creative brain. Why? Because it's a lot more fun, and we're not having nearly as much fun in the practice of law as we should. We're not even having nearly as much fun in business. And that's the problem that we run into. So we can't pick because we're in overwhelm mode. There's so many different places I can be in, so many different ways I could market, and where do I show up? And that puts us in stress, which is what we really want to talk about.
Right, absolutely. And with this information, I'll get to stress in just a moment, but as we're thinking about these opportunities that are available, do you recommend writing them all down and ranking them, or is there a process that you've seen to be effective in prioritizing and identifying what you're going to tackle first?
Absolutely. There is a process of figuring out where you show up. How much time do you put into it? How effective is it? How much ROI are you getting it? Look, I'm left brain linear analytical. We actually look at results. We baseline results and we track everything. However, that's like 50% into the program. The first step in all of that has to be, you can rank community service, because we actually build community service platforms for clients in terms of their brand and marketing. So you can go through, and in month 5, we actually do that in boot camp. Rank where you network, how often, what kind of ROI you're getting. Same thing with community service, and then proactively how much time and effort you want to put into it. But that's month 5 of our program, because without having the solid foundation of your own brand, i.e., who are you? What are your natural strengths? How do others define you? How do you define yourself? What are your adjectives around how you want to own it? What's your story? What's your audience like, and how is it going to land on them? Without having that solid foundation, that list doesn't get you very far, because now you got a list. Well, that list is not individualized at that point, because odds are, like every other lawyer, you're kind of just showing up places and taking a stab in the dark, because you have limited marketing opportunity time, because you've got to harmonize that with a practice and family and all sorts of other things on your plate.
Right. And then you're not going to do things well, or as you said, authentically, if you're just trying to go through and check boxes.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned stress. What does that really have to do with the firm growth and team management? How does that come into play on the day-to-day?
So much, Maddie. So about a decade ago, I wanted to prove my theories, because I'm a researcher. So that's my left linear brain, right? And I knew lawyers, because we're all analytical and we process so much from our comfortable left linear brain, would need to see the research to believe it. So I worked with a neuroscientist at UCLA, and here's what I found. There is a direct inverse correlation between stress and self-confidence. So as our self-confidence goes down, it's because our stress is going up. So stress is going up for a number of reasons. There are pressing deadlines, childcare to juggle, spousal issues, aging parents, traffic, court-imposed deadlines, all sorts of things. So as your stress is going up, and it naturally goes up for even the most self-confident clients. We have mostly C-suite clients who are self-confident, but when stress goes up, then your self-confidence starts to proportionally drop. It must. That's what my research shows, because it's a physiological response. So when that happens, stress is going up, self-confidence is going down. What's really happening? The result is your brand value diminishes. But what does that really mean, that your brand value diminishes? It means you're not emotionally resonating with your audience anymore. No one is buying what a great lawyer you are. No one is willing to hire you because you're not emotionally resonating with them anymore, as we talked about earlier. And so that stress self-confidence cycle, and you can all have, my gift to you is a free copy of my research summary. You don't want the actual research because it's boring, but the summary really proves it. So if you want to email me at the end of the session, or even now, Katy, Katy at Puris Consulting, Puris consulting.com, I'm happy to share that research summary with you. But how do we know when what's happening? So you can't actually sell and market when your stress is high and your self-confidence is low, because you're not effective. And that impacts employee productivity. So my expertise is in change, growth, and productivity. And when your stress is high and your self-confidence is low, you're not open to change, which means you're not open to growth. And all of that is about morale being low, which leads to employee productivity. So we find lawyers are sitting there trying to grind out, as always, like a 15-hour day, 16-hour day, and their productivity is diminishing by the minute incrementally as their stress is going up because their self-confidence is dropping. Signs of it. What are the signs of stress? So I found 3 signs. First of all, people are angry a lot. Okay. Anger at anything is a hallmark symbol or sign of stress. We can't control the situation, and so I'm angry because I'm stressed, and now my self-confidence is low. Another sign of stress is perfectionism, okay? I don't even know how many lawyers, including myself, that I'm always trying to get everything right and do it well because I'm stressed and I'm trying to control the situation. And then the third sign of stress is paralysis. When I can't control it anymore, I resign myself, and guess what? I become the big bottleneck in all law firms. My billables aren't ever going to go in on time. My client generation and lead generation is low. My collaboration skills are low. And I'm just a hot mess because I'm super stressed. And all of this comes down functionally to control. So a lot of law firms and lawyers, and actually just service providers, hire me because they want to be more influential. They want to increase their degree of influence, which is why we do an influence assessment. And I'll offer that to you guys and with a good deal at the end here. You cannot be influential when you're stressed because you're being controlling. There's a huge difference between being in control versus being controlling. So we're looking at control versus controlling. People who are in control are not stressed as much, and they're influential because they're leaders. They know their brand. They have an intentional plan, and they're marketing themselves with ease and grace and low stress. They are the ones that show up and they're silently leading because they're in control. Unfortunately, because of our way of being, of our natural tendencies as lawyers, we tend to be more controlling than in control. So we're throttling situations. We're trying to choke people into submission and forcing them through fear to, produce results, and opposing counsel, and trying to manipulate things because we don't know any other way. It's not our fault. We've never been trained and shown the distinction between being in control with ease and grace and thus generating a huge revenue through that means versus being controlling and trying to dominate everything and be in charge because that's what we think it means to be influential. Well, brands that are great inspire people to follow them emotionally, back to emotional resonance factor. And that has nothing to do with dominating or being controlling. So that's how stress plugs into all of this, and it's critically important. And if you want that research, whoever's listening, please email me, and I'm happy to share the summary with you so you can read it for yourself.
Katy, that's a great resource, and thank you for offering that. I definitely agree and try to build into my daily work and life that good now is better than great at some undetermined time later.
I like that.
if you take the philosophy that you have to be perfect at everything, then nothing ever gets done. And that even goes into developing a brand, right? Because there feels like so much pressure in distilling your, emotional resonance and your values and your skills and your expertise into a single tagline or image or website page, right? So how do you get comfortable with it and just decide, okay, I'm drawing a line and this is where I am at this point, and I have to launch this website, or I have to commit to this color scheme, or, let's talk about some of the real decisions that people are making that are very practical. How do you do you recommend working with just a really skilled designer who can help you say, you've made this many iterations and it's time to make a decision, and it's not written in stone, but, it's holding work back that needs to be done because this decision is the bottleneck?
Right. So it's the paralysis concept. And we see that often, all the time. Indecision. So part of my process is human-centered decision making, right? Which comes from a place of being grounded in who you are and your brand, and understanding how that flows into the firm brand, and then how that is defines the messaging that goes out so that your audience responds with ease, and so you don't have to work as hard. So we have to get rid of that paralysis through stress before people can make those real important decisions. So often we get people that are like, oh, I think I want to do this. I think I want to sign up for your program, but I just don't know. Maybe there'll be a better time. Maybe I'll feel better tomorrow. Guess what? They're making all their life decisions that way. From where they eat dinner, and they've kind of resigned themselves to being in the backseat of their life. And that is it's painful because you're not in control again. And what happens is they're being controlling in other levels in order to feel better. And, people may be listening to this and going, that's a lot of hooey because that's not how I live my life. Okay, that's great. I'm glad you're the exception. I just find that to be the rule more often than not. So how do you make those big decisions? You have to really step back and fundamentally wonder, why are you not making those decisions? So I'm one of those consultants that I really believe the question is way more important than the answer. And so we collaborate with a lot of website developers and a lot of brand, logo, and tagline people, because we often get law firms that come and the really smart senior associates or junior associates, really the millennials are fantastic these days. They'll come and go, we just did this rebrand and none of this makes sense. We have a new tagline, a new logo, a new website, but I don't know what to do with it. And no one's taught me. Everyone's just happy that we've kind of refreshed everything. But what does it mean? And that's the real inquiry. What does it mean? So I'd rather people sit on their websites and their taglines and develop their own brand and understanding of the whys around all of this, rather than just paying someone a lot of money to do it for you, which really isn't your voice. It's disingenuous. Or not even asking why it's done, and then having a work product that really doesn't get you very far. So how do you answer those questions? I find that people can't answer it very well and do the work because they have no frame of reference, they have no context, and they don't understand who they are. Even if it's like a 500-person law firm, there is a way to actually get the website up and pick the colors and pick the tagline and the logo, if you have done the groundwork on understanding why. And, web developers are good at spending an hour or two, putting their thoughts for you down because they know you're busy. But they've got thousands and thousands of clients. How is that truly going to be personalized to your firm? And it's not good enough anymore to have a logo or tagline that says, we deliver on time, we're good at what we do. Unique selling propositions have to start with the individuals, and they truly have to be unique. They can't be canned, okay? It doesn't work. And website companies and logo companies only have so much bandwidth to deal with the volumes of people they're dealing with. They do a great job of it, but that's where you have to step back and wonder why you're not making the right decisions. Trust your gut. It doesn't feel right because you're confused. Things aren't flowing well. It doesn't resonate. And guess what? If it doesn't resonate with you and you're in paralysis over it, it's not going to resonate with your audience without some deep thought and just taking time for understanding that the marketing piece is important. That's my
Yeah,
thought.
and utilizing the right people to guide the discussion, but not give you the answers.
Excellent point, Maddie. Yes, totally agree.
So how do you offload some of this work and relieve some of the stress by better utilizing the staff that you have or maybe could hire?
Yeah, that's a good point. It goes back to control versus controlling, right? So hiring good resources. And that's why we have trade show floors at ABA Tech Show. And that's why we offer vendors, because we want people to see that there are options out there for using technology well to run your practice well, so that you don't have to do it all yourself. And I can't even tell you how many lawyers, including how many established lucrative practices, say, we don't need that. We can do that ourselves. Or they use internal HR instead of hiring experts. So you want the brand shiny and credible. That means you must spend money. And it's called the economy because the longer you sit on money, the more stale it gets in your pocket. And I'm sure there's a lot of lawyers that are like, you're crazy, lady. That's fine. You know, you have your belief, I have mine, but I have seen the end result of that mentality. So I spend a lot of money on experts to give me technology to handle a lot of the resource needs that we have in my company. And I also spend a ton of money on consultants that know stuff more than I do, that are the experts in the field. Why? Because I do what I do well, and I'm going to let somebody else do what they do well to relieve some of the pressure. We can't do everything ourselves. And guess what? There are companies like Smith AI, like other organizations that have improved a process. And yes, they charge money for it, but that's because it's called economy and people deserve to get paid for their services. And if as lawyers we're not willing to spend money and value other people's services, guess what? My research shows that we don't value our own services and we're likely underpaid. One of the first things I do with all my clients is I increase their hourly billable or their flat fees, because we find they don't value themselves enough, oddly enough. And then they'll start spending money on technology and outside vendors and users, because they see that it's a cycle. And when you value yourself and understand your brand, then you can actually get comfortable bringing in help and bringing in support, which then feeds that cycle some more, right? Because your stress is lower because you've got outside support and your self-confidence goes up.
Definitely. And I think, you know, a really good point that you're circling around is the opportunity cost of your time versus others, because many people are trying to do all of the research for the software and services that can help them run a better firm or business. And what that does is it ends up, A, being incomplete because they don't have all the information and the unknown. And if they had tapped an expert, they could, yes, spend money up front, but save time, because their time is value. It's time that you're spending that could be spent on billable work, when instead you're spending your time and in fact your energy on something that is not the most efficient for you to work on, because you're trying to do the research for a new case management system or a new online calendaring system or billing, or how are you going to start taking credit card payments for your business that's traditionally only received checks. There are countless tasks that you could spend time yourself researching and trying to develop your own pseudo expertise. But actually, if you allow yourself, you permit yourself to tap into resources that already have this knowledge, not only do you save yourself the time, which is the opportunity cost, but you also get a more complete picture and a faster, better answer than probably you could get if you had done it all yourself. And frankly, that goes back to your point, Katy, about the controlling aspect versus knowing when to own something yourself versus outsource or offload it to someone who is better equipped to at least collect the data, if not make the decision. You know, to present you with the data so that you can make an informed decision.
Absolutely. So look, back to your point about business, Maddie, if you truly are a business person, and it's okay if you're not as a lawyer, but you recognize, so I have an undergrad in finance and accounting and econ, right? So it really is the opportunity cost that we always look at. Where are you misutilizing your time? And that's the whole point of this conversation, doing less and harnessing change. Changes are happening in your firm, in your practice. You can ignore them and hunker down and try to be controlling all these aspects of utilizing service providers and making decisions, or you can actually embrace changes, focus on your energy on that, and let others support you. Now, the fundamental premise in all of that is, where does this all come down to in terms of realizing that you don't have to do it all yourself and that there are people that can help you, and how that pragmatically can work out as a non-business person, and how to build that into your practice by seeing the value in it, even when you really can't see the value in it, because you're going to have to trust other people to support you. Otherwise, productivity, employee productivity, lawyer productivity has to go down. So we actually measure for that. And when you've got so much stuff swimming around in your head and you're small or solo or even a medium-sized firm, productivity is hampered because people can't focus clearly. And so when they're delegating tasks, they're misdelegating. And all of this comes back to the fact that you've got way too much that you're trying to juggle, and you're not open to allowing others to support you, and you can't trust them enough to support you and maybe do things better than you. That's the perfectionist in us lawyers. I can do it better myself. Well, great, but your list is now 80 deep, and it's going to take 400 years. And it's a bad cycle, right? Because then your stress goes up, your self-confidence goes down, according to my research, and you're not thriving. And you're certainly not doing less and harnessing change because you're not allowing for change. And guess what? It's happening anyway.
Well, and when you have greater confidence, then you feel less threatened by people who you're tapping into for that expertise, or you're, offloading a bit of work. If you understand your value and what is most valuable for you to spend your time on, then it doesn't feel so threatening to have people take over some of the work that you used to do, because that frees you up for not only doing work that you're better suited to do, but also learn new skills that help you maintain your competitive advantage and maintain your relevance in what is very much a competitive market.
Absolutely. You say it so well, Maddie. So one of the hallmarks and the foundations for what I teach in brand development is that, I think it's gender-based. Men thrive on competition, and that's hardwiring for being the protectors and providers to the family, right? However, competition drives up stress for us. And so one of the biggest things clients, lawyers get out of my programs is that they understand what their unique attributes and how truly unique their brand is and who they are as people. They're never going to see themselves as competition for other people, and that they're not going to look at even service providers as competition to their time or to their money, because everyone is complementary to us. And that actually frees up a ton of stress, and it frees up the right creative brain to actually see alternative solutions. And so a vendor before who was driving me crazy is now a really nice looking option, because I've let go of the reins a little bit. And I realized that, you know what, I have a lot of great attributes, and everyone's complementary to me. And so I'm going to be able to actually see that very differently, which is the whole point. How do you choose to see your life and your practice differently? And if that makes you uncomfortable, fantastic. A lot of what I talk about makes people uncomfortable. And I always say, that's good. Because if it didn't make you uncomfortable, you wouldn't be growing and you wouldn't be open to change. And so we don't want your practice to become stale. So that's a huge part of actually seeing the world differently and being open to vendors and hiring people, when you see that competition doesn't have to be so stressful. You can thrive, and so can the next guy.
Definitely. There is room for much more in the market, especially if you know your value proposition. And I think also it becomes an opportunity for growth and outsourcing when you challenge your own assumptions in the details that you think everyone else is aware of that maybe only are obvious to you. So often we get in this mindset where we're very focused on these nitty-gritty details that we've seen a million times. But for example, you know, the particular shade of blue on your website, or this one word that you keep messing with in your brand tagline, how much is someone going to take stock in that, or judge it, or base their decision on that as you think they are? Because we can so often get consumed by details that we are painfully aware of that actually other people may not be so aware of, or even use to make a decision whether or not to hire you or use your business.
Absolutely. But that's what makes us good as lawyers, right, Maddie? The details, the fine line, the gray slippery slope, that's how we're trained from a left linear perspective.
Right.
However, we have to save that for the substantive work we do. And actually, even there, what you were talking about perfectionism, I always tell clients, do not hire perfectionists, because perfectionists are expensive, right? Because they're never going to get it right, but they're going to bill and they're going to charge you, and you're always going to have to clean up after them. So,
especially if you charge a flat rate, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's a good point. So how much are people going to notice the shade of blue? Well, everything is a subconscious emotional thing we buy, which is everything I teach is about subconscious processing of information. And so it's important, but how much importance? It's about productivity. So we find lawyers will focus on stuff like that because it's easier to look at that and waste time, frankly, and pretend like you're an expert instead of letting the experts handle it, than actually letting go and saying, maybe I should focus my time on the more difficult stuff that I don't want to do, which is figuring out my own brand and figuring out who I am, which will fundamentally make these decisions easier if I decide to make it. So everything I talk about is putting lawyers in control of their practice and their destiny. And issues like that just kind of disappear as a result of our work because it's so inconsequential then. But then the right decision gets made, which means that the clients show up because they're attracted emotionally to that color or that tagline, and there's a reason behind it now.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you have the data and the research to demonstrate why you make certain recommendations. I mean, obviously it's your expertise, but it's also, as you mentioned before, it's a combination of expertise and guidance and experience that you have, combined with the data that you are poring over and that you've reviewed, that you can distill for the clients. Can you share, Katy, now that we only have a few minutes left, how people can get in touch with you and tap into your expertise if they want to learn more and grow their firms and reduce stress as you're describing?
Of course, if I can be of support, and if anything I've said today has resonated, there's so many gifts for you out here through what I do. So there are books. You can go to our website. I've written 2 books. My 3rd book hasn't come out yet. My book for lawyers, ABA, Personal Branding in 1 Hour for Lawyers, was a bestseller when it first came out, and that's available. You just click the link and it'll take you to the ABA site and you can buy that. So there's a lot of DIY. You can sign up free for our e-newsletters. And the link is on our website, which is purisconsulting.com, P-U-R-I-S like Sam, consulting.com. So once a month, we send you free content, tons of content. There's a free podcast I do. We send those out to you as well. And there's a free Katy TV that we put out as well, where it's actually a TV episode with content. And if you want more than that, if this material really resonates and you want it personalized to you, I do a degree of influence brand assessment. It's a growth and brand assessment to tell you where you are. I send you a set of questions, you answer it and send it back to me. I review it, and then we sit down together, and in an hour, we answer as many of your questions together as we can, and we decide on next steps for you, if there are going to be next steps. So that's usually $350 for that assessment with me. But for this audience today, it's $175 if anyone wants to do that, and they just have to email me, Katy@purisconsulting.com. And then the third tool, which if you're looking to really get going fast and accelerate, is called the Branding Boot Camp. I've been doing that for a decade now. We have the virtual online version, so you could take it from your office or your couch, which is going to start April 19th of 2019. And that's 7 months of networking virtually, of working through this material, and it's live. So once a month for 2 hours on a set date, the entire cohort meets live on Zoom video conferencing. And we tackle everything we talked about today in a syllabus that's available even on our website. If you just go to our website, purisconsulting.com, and drop down to boot camp, you will see the entire curriculum, and you will see what people who have taken it have said about it. So that's usually $397 a month. And it's a 7-month program. And if you do the savings on that, one-on-one work I do with clients is roughly $15,000 to $20,000. So paying way less than that to be able to network across the country and get the same results is great for people. And if it's $397 a month, and for this audience, we're offering $347 a month if they say they came through the ProLaw CLE and through the Smith AI portals. And we're happy to honor that. And that starts April 19th. And if that doesn't do enough for you, well, then let's talk and we'll see what your specific needs are. And if I can't help you, then I'm happy to give you to so many resources that we have at the American Bar Association. And that's another great resource. If you want to join the American Bar Association, fees are changing in May. They're dropping. And the ABA Law Practice Division at that point is going to be free. So you just have to check the box. And at the ABA Law Practice Division, we really teach you how to practice the business of being a lawyer. So finance, marketing, technology, and management. And so there's tons of resources. You just have to make the time, prioritize yourself and your career. There are people that are willing to support you. You just have to realize that there is support out there for you and that you can do less and harness change and grow your practice and just have more fun and have a more carefree life.
Katy, thank you so much, and for the generous offers of increasing access with those discounts to you and to your programs that have been so well tested and proven. It was a pleasure chatting with you today, and thank you for joining us. For more information and advice for growing businesses, Smith AI does have a blog where we have guest authors, and you'll see videos like this uploaded. That's smith.ai/blog, and we would be glad to be a resource to you for developing a better practice through automation and outsourcing, utilizing experts, insofar as we can help you labor less and lawyer more in your practice, and to build a great brand that, as Katy mentioned, has clarity, consistency, and a positive perception. So thank you so much for joining us today, and take good care of yourself.
Thank you.